Now, don't worry. I could spend a full 2 hours on this concept here that I'm developing, and I'm not going to do it because, in a sense, we've been there and done that. My only new addition to it today is I continue to be amazed at how many people still don't get it or are just seeing it for the first time, or at least admitting it. That, hey, you know what? We're all fellow patriots. We're all Americans here. I mean, this is just common, ordinary, everyday political argument and dispute. There's nothing more to this than that. Now, you can say that the Republicans have chosen to stay silent because they're afraid of being called racists or Obama's going to be... I'm worn out, folks, on the excuses. I'm worn out. We won 2 landslide elections, and somehow they were dealt a bad hand in the budget. We win 2 landslide elections, the Democrats lose 1,000 seats, and somehow the clock ran out. I mean, all of these excuses. And every time Obama wins, it's not just liberalism winning and another day that we lose and making it harder and harder to eventually win the argument. This is not about winning the argument anymore. That's just phase 1. There's a whole lot of really bad stuff that's been done the past 7 years that has to be rolled back if this country is to resume its normal behavioral track. These people set out to transform this country into something it was not founded to be, and they've had a lot of success, while the Republican Party has sat by, and some of our intellectuals have sat by silently, just thinking there's nothing more here than an academic debate going on. And the only thing I'm saying, I'm surprised that D'Souza was one of these. I thought D'Souza was among the crowd of us who got it from get-go and understood it. But apparently it took being thrown in jail on a trumped-up charge for D'Souza to finally see who Obama is and what his agenda is really all about. And that the nation, as we know and love it, is actually in the process of being transformed, and some might say up for grabs now. Now, the companion piece I referenced is Kevin Williamson in National Review today. The Democrats' theme for 2016 is totalitarianism. Well, it's more than a theme. Share with you the beginning of this piece. At the beginning of December, Rolling Stone writer Jeff Goodell asked Secretary of State Kerry, this is a journalist now, Rolling Stone magazine, far left rock and roll magazine, beginning of December, a writer there asked John Kerry whether Charles and David Koch, 2 libertarian political activists, should be considered an enemy of the state. Now, Charles and David Koch, Koch Industries, true, they're wealthy. Yes, they're libertarians. They raise money. They stand for traditional American values. They employ tens of thousands of people. I mean, they're standard, ordinary, everyday American citizens. They are great patriots. Rolling Stone magazine goes ask John Kerry, should they be considered enemies of the state? He also posed the same question about Exxon. Should Exxon be considered? Do you realize enemy of the state? You know what kind of language that is? Enemy of the state, there's no such concept in the U.S. Constitution. When we're talking about domestic politics and competing ideas, these kinds of phrases, enemy of the state, this kind of status occurs in dictatorships, in tyranny, banana republics, and so forth. So the Rolling Stone writer Jeff Goodell asked Kerry if the Kochs should be considered an enemy of the state and Exxon should be considered an enemy of the state. And John Kerry, who ran for president in 2004, said that he looked forward to the seizure of Exxon's assets for the crime of proselytizing impermissibly about the question of global warming. John Kerry responded to the Rolling Stone writer by saying, yeah, he looked forward to the government seizing Exxon's assets for the crime of opposing global warming. Folks, this is not Lyndon Johnson back in the days with Barry Goldwater, Richard Nixon. This is a whole different ball game that we're involved in here. You have a Secretary of State who is unafraid to acknowledge that he'd be perfectly willing and is looking forward to seizing Exxon's assets, a worldwide multinational corporation, simply because of the way they talk about global warming. How in the world can we still have Republicans or conservatives thinking that all this is something akin to a debate in the faculty lounge at Harvard or Yale? How can it be that so many people still fail to come to grips with what we're up against? And that all of this in the country, support for Trump or anybody other than an establishment candidate, is patriotism. It's not racism or sexism or bigotry or any of these things. It's people who love their country, who see it being snatched away from them, who see it being transformed before their very eyes. How can you not, with the borders wide open and the influx of people who in no way, shape, manner, or form even understand where they're coming except for the fact that it's a welfare state? Or it's something to undermine. If you happen to be a terrorist sleeper cell member, it's a place to come to undermine. It's a place to come to get even with. It's a place to come because you think it's guilty of all these atrocities around the world for 200 years. We have made a joke of the whole concept of any new arrivals assimilating and become Americans because to this current crop of liberal Democrats, American's a dirty word now. America equals the white male patriarchy that has to change. We have to get rid of it. And if you think that that is an exaggeration, hang in there and be tough, because I have found a piece. You might think it's written by a kook and a wacko and an oddball, and it is. But that's the point. The kooks and oddballs and wackos have become the mainstream, the radicals, and now the mainstream. Writer Rebecca Traister, Obama and Hillary represent the death throes of exclusive white male power in the United States. This was last Wednesday, and it's not in the Communist Daily Worker. It's in New York Magazine. The current election campaign pits the forces of backlash, the old and angry, that would be the white male power structure, against the forces of frontlash, that would be the new and different. The new and different are Hillary and Obama and left-wing causes. She posits in this piece that Obama and Hillary represent an altered power structure and changed calculations about who in this country may lead. She said, while the resistance may be symptomatic of death throes, a rage at the dying of the white male light, it nonetheless presents a very real threat. Imagine Ted Cruz or Donald Trump or Marco Rubio in office with a Republican Congress and Supreme Court seats to fill. Voting would be restricted, immigration would be halted, abortion would be banned, equal pay would be unprotected, same-sex marriage would be overturned. We can't permit this. That is the way they are mobilizing. This moment, this election, these years represent the death throes of exclusive white male power in the U.S. So as far as this woman's concerned, believe me, she's not an outlier. She's mainstream. Your support for Trump or your outrage against the Washington establishment, Republican or otherwise, all it means is that you are in the white male camp and you have always had the power. You've always been able to dictate the social norms and the political direction. You've been able to dictate everything about this country, but not anymore because we're taking it away from you. You destroyed this country, you white males, going back to the founders. You implemented all of this hate and racism and imperialism. You destroyed poor people all over the world. You became an illegitimate superpower by stealing every other nation's resources. Everything about you is illegitimate, including your white race, and we are getting even. And this is what's mobilizing out there. It's right in front of your face. It's everywhere you look, from the White House on down to whatever it was, Occupy Wall Street, you name it, hands up, don't shoot, Ferguson, Baltimore, it's everywhere. This is what's mobilizing it. And it's not just anger at white male power. That's a way to mobilize the anti-forces. This is a direct frontal assault. It's not even happening under cover of darkness now. It's a direct frontal assault on the very idea of the United States of America. As a capitalist entrepreneurial nation of individual liberty and freedom, transformed to a nation of totalitarian state control to enforce upon a majority of people things that they oppose, would never support, would never vote for, because they are illegitimate by virtue of their own existence. That's what we're up against. And apparently, folks, there's still a very precious few of us who actually understand it. And the danger is, if we're wrong, well, okay, we've been wrong and the result's not so bad. If we're right, but we can't get a majority to follow us, and if we're right and we're not able to stop this, then all this fear that people have, the future of their kids and their grandkids, it's real. The fear, the opposition that exists out there, it's not rooted in racism and bigotry and sexism, and it's rooted in patriotism and a love for what this country was, still is in some places, and should always be. Anyway, I'm long here. I got to take another break. Pretty much move on from this point. You get the drill. I mean, the point is that if you want to understand why the Republican budget deal the way it was, they don't understand what we're up against. And even that, it's hard to rationalize. I know, well, we were dealt a bad hand. Well, the clock was ticking. Well, none of that. Just don't understand it. We won 2 landslide elections. You know, I've got to take a break. I'm sorry. Back in here just a second.